NBA trade deadline has come and it has gone. And here are the notable trade deadline moves. Aaron Gordon is heading to the Nuggets. The Bulls get Nikola Vucevic, Evan Fournier to the Celtics. Those three players all coming from Orlando. The Blazers get Norman Powell from the Raptors, but Kyle Lowry stays put. A couple of late moves right before the deadline. Rajon Rondo to the Clippers in exchange for Lou Williams, who's headed to Atlanta. And Victor Oladipo is headed to the Miami Heat. So let's break it down. We've got Rip Hamilton and we've got our NBA writer Colin Ward-Henninger. Let's start with Victor Oladipo. Rip, it looked like he was going to be staying put in Houston and going to be set to become an unrestricted free agent. But right after the deadline, news trickled out that he was going to Miami. What kind of a boon is this for the Heat?
Well, it's a big splash for the Miami Heat. When you look at Victor Oladipo, especially a year ago when he was with the Indiana Pacers, Miami tried to lure him away from the Pacers and try to get him to Miami. So to have him and get the opportunity to have him on this roster, and they didn't have to give up Bam Adebayo, they didn't have to give up Jimmy Butler, and they still got Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero. I mean, you gotta take your hats off for what Pat Riley has done to add another piece to the roster. I think he's a huge plus to this team. And the reason why I say that is because when you look at from a playmaking standpoint, they only have one guy, and that's Jimmy Butler. When Jimmy missed multiple games this season, the shooters struggled. Duncan Robinson struggled. Tyler Hero struggled because they couldn't get their shot on their own. You add a guy like Victor Oladipo, a guy that is great at playmaking, not just for himself, but for his teammates. You can move him to the point guard position where he's great at coming off pick and roll and making plays for the finding wide open shooters on the floor. So I think this is going to be a huge plus to this Miami Heat roster.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a huge win for the Heat. First of all, because they didn't have to give up anything. They basically replaced Avery Bradley with Victor Oladipo, which, you'll take that 7 days a week. And they did have to give up Kelly Olynyk, but they traded for Nemanja Bjelica, essentially that same stretch big. And then we'll see what they do with LaMarcus Aldridge on the buyout market. So essentially the Heat just got a free upgrade here, and it gives them a look at Oladipo. This is a guy who they've had their eye on, as Rip mentioned, for a long time. And he's a free agent this summer. So they get a look at him. They get to see how he fits with that team, with that culture, and get to see whether he's a guy they want to commit long-term money to. But as of now, I mean, for the trade deadline, the Heat are certainly a winner. And I'm excited to see what Oladipo can do in a system where he's happy. He seemed unhappy in Indiana. He was clearly unhappy in Houston because of all the losing. So he gets to be on a team that is going to be in the mix in the Eastern Conference, particularly now, a team that went to the NBA Finals. So I'm excited for Oladipo, and I think the Heat made a really good move here.
In a three-way tie for that 5th spot right now, just a half game behind the Hornets for home court advantage in the first round of the NBA playoffs. A team you don't see there, the Orlando Magic, and that's a team that unloaded a bunch of players early in the day. Colin, what'd you think of the fire sale in Orlando involving Vucevic and Gordon and Fournier?
Finally, it finally happened. I mean, this is something that the NBA world has been waiting for a long time. The Magic have kind of been floundering and trying to fight for the 8 seed for so long. So to see them unload their players was really exciting, and it signaled a full rebuild, which the Magic have really needed to do. I was surprised to see Nikola Vucevic go because he seemed like a player that was going to kind of be their bedrock. But for the Bulls to acquire him, I think that was a really good move for them. I think he's a guy who doesn't get a lot of attention because he plays in Orlando and they've been so bad this season. But he's an extremely talented offensive player, just a steady producer who is just going to be there every single night for you. And Fournier going to the Celtics, I think everyone had their eyes on Aaron Gordon and thinking that he was going to go to Boston. I actually think Fournier is a pretty good fit, and they didn't have to give up nearly the haul that they would have had to give up for Gordon. They were talking about potentially 2 first-round picks. Marcus Smart's name was thrown out there. So to get Fournier, a wing, which they desperately need, who can make shots, a little better playmaker than a lot of people might think, for 2 second-round picks, I think that was good. So the Magic made the right decision in getting rid of these guys, and I think the teams that they went to are going to benefit in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Colin. The Magic had to make a change. I think the last couple of years with them making it to the playoffs and only getting into the 8th seed and end up early first round exit, they had to make a decision. Do we go young or do we get rid of some of our veteran guys that we hope to get us over the hump? So I thought that was a huge plus. I like where Vucevic went to the Chicago Bulls. Chicago still was able to keep their great guards with Zach LaVine on that roster. I can only imagine, can't wait to see him and Vucevic in pick and roll situation. Vucevic is not just a guy that just plays with his back to the basket. He's a guy that plays on the perimeter too. He shoots the three ball at a high clip. And to have that guy on your roster that can space the floor with all the other young guys that you have on this roster, I think Chicago probably did the best during this trade situation. But I thought that the Orlando Magic had to make a move, and I thought that this was the best thing for their team.
A lot of teams out there think that they have an opportunity to make a run at this thing because there just isn't a clear-cut favorite right now. You probably say the Nets, when everybody's healthy, they've got the team that can do it. But the Lakers, they've been shaky. LeBron James is out with an injury, so we just don't know. In the Western Conference, you have the Portland Trail Blazers, who always seem to be a team that's in the playoffs and a difficult out a lot of the time. Colin, what'd you think of them going out and getting not Kyle Lowry from the Raptors, but Norman Powell, a player who reportedly had at least a dozen teams interested in his services at this deadline?
Yeah, Norman Powell's a great player. He's a tremendous scorer. He's been shooting the three ball extremely well. I gotta say, I don't quite get him on the Blazers. They already had a really small backcourt with Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. Adding Norman Powell, that's another guy who's like 6'3" or so, and you have to give up some wing depth in Gary Trent and Rodney Hood. So the Blazers spent a lot of their offseason beefing up on the wing, right? They got Robert Covington, they got Rodney Hood. They're adding these guys, Derrick Jones Jr., and now they get rid of a lot of that and get a third guy. I think the thinking behind it is that when Dame and CJ McCollum get trapped, they now have a guy, an extra playmaker, an extra shooter that they can dump the ball off to make something happen. So, when I first saw this deal, I was a little confused. I thought, Aaron Gordon would have been an excellent trade target for them, and they probably went after him and maybe got outbid. Norman Powell's a great player. I just don't quite see the fit with the Blazers. I guess they think they're just going to go out and try to outscore everybody because defense is probably going to be a problem.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Colin. I do not like this move by the Portland Trail Blazers. You give up a young guy, Gary Trent Jr. Yeah, we know he's about to become a free agent, but this guy's been solid for the Portland Trail Blazers. He knows his role. He plays both sides of the ball, and he can stretch the floor. Norman Powell has definitely improved his game over the last couple of years. When he came into this league, we thought he was just an athletic kid that can play really tough on the defensive end. But yes, from a point production, his offensive game has got better. Been a much improved shooter from the three-point line. I just don't think this helps the Portland Trail Blazers, especially when you know that your strongest positions is your guard position. I thought maybe they should try to go out and get a guy that can play multiple positions, that can take pressure off the smaller guards on their roster. I don't like this move at all.
And of course, his teammate ends up staying put in Toronto. That would be Kyle Lowry. That's a surprise to many. I mean, there's some other players who we thought might get moved that aren't being moved. Lonzo Ball staying in New Orleans. Andre Drummond reportedly working on a buyout with the Cavs, as is LaMarcus Aldridge with the San Antonio Spurs. But Colin, why didn't a deal get done for Kyle Lowry? It seemed like that was a done deal. I mean, we heard him last night. It seemed like he was saying his farewell to the Raptors.
Right, he's given peace signs as he's leaving the court. He has this tremendous plus 42 game. The storybook was written, and then the deal didn't happen. So it sounds like, Masai Ujiri just didn't get the kind of offers that he wanted. And if you look at it, Larry's going to be a free agent this summer. So you're going to say, hey, the Raptors should have just gotten something for him if he's going to leave. But there's no, telling whether he's going to leave or not. This guy's still a very productive player. I'm sure the Raptors believe that this is kind of an anomaly season and that they're still going to be contenders next year. So maybe they can re-sign him. And if not, maybe they can work some sort of sign and trade where they get a trade exception or some kind of asset over the summer of the offseason. But it was clear that, this was the trade that everyone expected to happen. We thought Philly was in the mix. We thought Miami was in the mix. And for him to stay in Toronto is kind of a downer for us NBA fans because we know Toronto just isn't in position to contend this year. And Lowry going to one of those teams would have made things very, very interesting, particularly in the Eastern Conference. So I think Lowry is probably very happy to stay in Toronto. He's their all-time best player there. He's beloved there. But I think this summer is going to be interesting to see if Lowry leaves and the Raptors don't end up getting anything. Maybe they'll look back at this trade deadline and say maybe we should have pushed for a deal.
I always think it's awkward when I say goodbye to somebody and then you run into them again in like 5 minutes and it's kind of like, oh, okay, we're not going to do another big goodbye. Weird situation for Kyle Lowry, Rip. I mean, put yourself in his shoes. He basically, like Colin said, he was going out a winner. They finally snapped the losing streak. He had a really good game. Waves goodbye, gets the call from Drake, and he's still there.
And this happens all the time, Chris. I mean, sometimes, you know, especially you hear Duncan Robinson saying, hey, I didn't even take my pregame nap because, you know, I'm hearing rumors that I might get traded for Kyle Lowry. So guys really don't know. The one thing that you got to love about Toronto Raptors in this whole Kyle Lowry deal is they have a lot of respect for Kyle Lowry. They're not just going to trade him without him knowing or where he's going. He's going to have a lot of say in this move. So there was also talk that Toronto might keep him and maybe sign him for a one-year extension. We don't know that. Kyle Lowry has definitely made his mark here in Toronto. He's a great leader for this team. This is a situation right here, though. Even though he comes back to Toronto, it's not a bad thing for the Toronto Raptors. He's been great for this organization. He's been the face of the organization for the last 10 years. I just think that this is a situation now. He'll be a free agent at the end of the year. Then he can make a decision on where he wants to go.
All right, Rip Hamilton, Colin Ward-Henninger joining us here on HQ, reacting to the deadline, which has come and gone in the NBA. Some players staying put, like Kyle Lowry. Others on the move, including all of these players. The Magic unloading the top three. Aaron Gordon to the Nuggets, Nikola Vucevic to the Bulls, Evan Fournier to the Celtics, Norman Powell, Kyle Lowry's former teammate in Toronto, is heading to the Blazers. And Rip and Colin were kind of scratching their heads at that move. They just don't understand how he fits there. Rip loves George Hill to the 76ers. I know they wanted Lowry, didn't get him. And the Heat getting a couple players, most notably Victor Oladipo. Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.